A good Friday morning, and thanks for joining us here on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Alicia Lewis. This morning, we're tracking new developments in the deadly ICE shooting in Minneapolis. The New York Times reporting a surge of federal agents is expected through this weekend, and now Minnesota's role in the investigation is changing. On Thursday, the BCA said the feds cut off its access to the evidence and witness statements. Federal and local law enforcement initially said they'd work together. Minneapolis city leaders speaking about that decision this morning.
So our ask is really simple here. Our ask is to embrace the truth. Our ask is to include the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in this process because we in Minneapolis want a fair investigation. Is it deeply concerning that this administration from the very get-go is drawing the conclusion that they may ultimately come to? Of course it is. And if you got nothing to hide from, then don't hide from it.
This comes as Vice President J.D. Vance told reporters that ICE agents have absolute protection from state charges, a statement legal experts dispute.
The idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity, I've never seen anything like that.
The Vice President is wrong. There are claims in some cases of federal immunity. I do not believe that would apply in this case.
While blanket immunity is being disputed there are some legal protections for federal agents. Legal experts say a judge would have to decide if the agent acted reasonably within their federal duties. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says that the reason Minnesota was cut out of the investigation is that they have no jurisdiction in the case. This morning, students across the Minneapolis School District are staying home another day after this intense encounter with Border Patrol agents outside of Roosevelt High School. The incident now prompting teachers and families to take action. This morning, we heard from some educators who say they've been walking students to vehicles and following school buses home because agents have been around schools across the city recently. This morning, more educators holding a rally pushing back on immigration enforcement around and inside of their schools after the chaotic scene at Roosevelt High School happened on Wednesday. And here's video that we were sent. It shows agents tackling one man to the ground. Students say he's an educator. You can see others scuffling with those agents there, but then another video shows a student throwing a snowball. We spoke to the student that witnessed this and took the video.
I was coming back from Eden with my friends, and we were just driving back to school. And we just see everything was so packed, and we just see ICE, they parked in the whole front. And then just them arguing with the principals, the teachers here. They were telling them to get out. And I just see a crashed car right there with a busted car window.
DHS says a U.S. citizen was trying to impede Border Patrol operation at a different location, and that he rammed his vehicle into a government car, which started a 5-mile chase that ended here. Now, DHS is also saying that agents on scene did not use chemical irritants on the crowd that gathered. However, video evidence from the scene appears to dispute that. This morning, Governor Walz has the National Guard on standby for several rallies and protests planned through the weekend. Tomorrow's at Powderhorn Park was already planned before the shooting happened. That one takes place at 1 p.m. Now, thankfully, they've all stayed mostly peaceful so far. This was the scene at Lake Street and Chicago Avenue last night. Protesters marching to 34th Street and Portland Avenue. And that is where a memorial for good continues to grow today. Protesters say they're not going to stop hitting the streets until they see accountability in Good's case.
It's sad. It's real sad to see all of us having to do this again, especially after George Floyd. We shouldn't have to keep on doing this.
Now is a time more than ever that we need to continue monitoring, continue checking, and continue looking after our neighbors.
Again, protesters say they're not going to stop hitting the streets until they see accountability. We're also learning more about Renee Good, the 37-year-old woman who died in Wednesday's shooting. Good's family tells our affiliate in Denver that she's from the Colorado Springs area and recently lived in Kansas City, Missouri before moving here about 8 months ago.
She's from here. One of her own was just murdered in cold blood. For what reason?
Good's ex-husband told the Associated Press that she has 3 children. Before the shooting happened, he says she was on her way home after dropping off her 6-year-old child. This morning, we're learning new details about the ICE agent who fired the shots. Jonathan Ross has been with the agency for around 10 years. Our Jennifer Hoff has a closer look at his background, including his connection to another incident in Minnesota and the training that ICE officials receive.
We now know Officer Ross was hurt after being dragged by a suspect he was trying to arrest in a car just last June, as pressure from the administration mounts to make thousands of arrests a day.
No!
As the investigation plays out into Wednesday's shooting, we now know the agent accused of killing Renee Good was dragged by a suspect trying to flee in a vehicle 7 months ago in Bloomington. Department of Homeland Security says Roberto Carlos Munoz was found guilty of assault, not domestic terrorism. The agency's secretary is alleging happened yesterday, defending its use of force policies.
Fearing for his life and the other officers around him and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots. He used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues.
DHS policy says officers can only use the level of force that's objectively reasonable. But longtime Homeland Security NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley says that doesn't always include a fleeing vehicle. Can an agent shoot at a moving vehicle?
If indeed this car was driving toward the officer, he would have been justified to shoot until he eliminated the threat. But that is a big assumption to assume that the car was intentionally driving to the officer with the intent to kill.
Ainsley says officers are also trained not to approach the front of a vehicle for their own safety and to de-escalate a situation.
You also wouldn't want to fire shots so close in a place that could have hit the other officer.
DHS also has a policy about wearing body cameras, but it's not being implemented or funded across the board. Noam saying the FBI would decide whether to release video if there is any.
We're following the standard protocol procedures we do in situations like this.
Another major change is the elimination of what's called a field office worksheet that includes extensive details about their target. DHS says was actually hindering the overall amount of arrests. It's also unclear if Officer Ross is on administrative leave, which is standard. Secretary Noam saying he did go to the hospital, but is now back with his family. Back to you.
We're also following a developing situation out of Portland. The FBI is now investigating another shooting by federal agents. 2 people were injured there. Border Patrol officials say a person tried to run the agents over during an attempted arrest, and an agent fired a defensive shot. The car left the scene, but the 2 people went to the hospital. Agents believe both are affiliated with a Venezuelan gang. And the situation is rapidly changing as new details continue to come in. We're working to get you accurate information once we verify it. So stay with KARE 11 on air, online, and right here on KARE 11 Plus for the latest updates. A look from our nation's capital this morning, where a proposal to extend Affordable Care Act subsidies is heading to the Senate. Yesterday, 17 House Republicans voting with Democrats to approve a 3-year extension. Those subsidies expired at the end of 2025 and were the biggest sticking point in last year's record-breaking government shutdown. Let's turn now to health news this morning. New flu data from the Minnesota Department of Health shows nearly 3,000 people have been hospitalized statewide. So far, no pediatric deaths have been reported. The flu continues to spread in schools and long-term care facilities, with more than 170 school outbreaks and nearly 60 in long-term care settings. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Department of Health says it's going to now look to professional medical groups instead of the CDC for its vaccine guidance. That comes after the CDC revised its childhood immunization schedule, dropping the number of vaccines from 18 to 11. MDH claims the federal change doesn't reflect the best available science and didn't follow intensive scientific review. New overnight, we're learning a Minnesota woman has died after a suspected shark attack in the U.S. Virgin Islands just yesterday. According to this Facebook post from Virgin Islands police, officers responded to reports of a woman bitten by a shark in St. Croix. Police say the woman lost an arm during the attack and later died from her injuries. She's been identified as 57-year-old Arlene Lillis. Crews searched the area for a possible second victim, but no one was found. The investigation is ongoing. Happening today, Luigi Mangione is in federal court. His attorneys are set to argue that he should not face the death penalty if he's convicted of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The defense team wants the judge to drop the murder through use of firearm charge, which carries the death penalty. They also say capital punishment should be off the table because the Justice Department has a conflict of interest. All right, stick with us. More news and weather is coming up after the break.